All right, who is ready to talk about Abraham Lincoln's weird-ass adolescence? I am, me. Okay, so when I was a little kid, I had this book, and I loved it so much. It belonged to my third grade teacher, and Mrs., let's call her Mrs. Ferris. I don't really want to give out her name, of course. And Mrs. Ferris had a library in her classroom, and she had this book about Abraham Lincoln, and it was called Abraham Lincoln and the River Robbers. And y'all listen, if you thought Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter was like some frisky business, this book, I'm going to do a review on it, okay? Just a whole video for Abraham Lincoln and the River Robbers by LeVar Anderson, I think is his name, or their name. It is this weird-ass story about how when Abraham Lincoln was 19 years old, he just went off on the Mississippi on a flatboat, and he just kind of did the Huckleberry Finn thing for a couple years. But it was like it was like the Adventures of Tom Sawyer meets Roadhouse with Patrick Swayze. This was during Abraham Lincoln's just wild ass youth. It is such an Aquarian thing. Like, he had a million jobs, so he was so tired of his toxic dad that he built his own flatboat. He is the only president to hold a patent. He had an invention for lifting the flatboats over shoals when they were going through the river. Shoals were like these built up mounds of shells and mussel and what have you that would snag the boat and tear the bottom out. So he invented this thing. That's just such an Aquarian thing. And they're like, and he invented this, and he was like, oh yeah, and I'm moving on to being a steamboat captain. So he had all these adventures on the Mississippi River. And this was the first time he encountered an up close and personal, like, seeing slavery up close and personal, going down to New Orleans and seeing people just being horrifically, inhumanely bought and sold as property. And at this point, at the tender young age of 19, Abe was like, I hate this thing. And, like, he had a rage in his heart for it. And I know it's impossible. You can't know celebrities. You can't know famous people, especially those who are dead. But you can't ever know the person they were. But just looking at what a strange person he was, but overall, I think a pretty wholesome person Abraham Lincoln was. Like, he had some really good lights. And of course, he was a human being, okay? This is not a fictional FBI Adonis that I put on a pedestal. Like, this is a real guy. He lived a life. He had mistakes. At one point, he farted during a seance in the White House. True story. We'll get to that. Don't worry. So at this point, Abraham Lincoln was just going around to, like, riverboat camps and logging camps and just Teamster camps with a group of his friends, and he'd just, like, challenge the biggest guy there, and he'd be like, hey man, I'll fight you for this campsite for your supplies. Just, you know. And sometimes he'd just go and he'd be like, hey, you want to fight? And they'd be like, sure. And so he was just tallying up, just beating the ass of people. During the span of 12 years, what I like to call Abe's wandering, years, if the Grateful Dead had existed them, Abe would have followed them. He's an Aquarius, okay? So Abe, during this wild-ass time in Abe's life, he had over 300 fights, and he lost one. During his brief service in the military, it was a guy, and he was like, I want to sleep at this side of the campfire. And Abe's like, no, I want that one, and give it to me. And the guy was like, I'll fight you for it. And they did, and Abe lost. And it was the only time in his life he lost a fight. So, Abe, during this time in his life, you see him, like, running from the sadness of losing his mom and his sister, and all the people in his community that died of milk sickness. Hell, you don't even think about that, right? So he is, you see his Mercury, Pluto, and Jupiter, like, all lined up in Pisces, in the fourth house, the house of the family, the home, and of just, like, baby birds getting their wings and flying beyond into the fifth house. And it's so fitting that this is all in Pisces, because his wife, Mary Todd Lincoln, is a Piscean woman, and we'll get to her So at this point, Abe was like, "Shit, I'm broke. I'm just beating up mother lovers to just get a buck. And what I really need to do is like settle down and like get a job and just save some money, you know." And so he goes to West Springfield, Illinois, and he meets up with this guy, and the guy's like, "Hey, look, I have a general store, but I want to start a bar, but I don't have any." It was like Roadhouse. When I say it was like Tom Sawyer meets Roadhouse, I'm not joking. So the guy was like, "Hey, Abe, you got to clean up this place. It's filthy." And so Abe was like, "Oh, yeah, sure, no problem." And all the people in West Springfield were like, "Oh, this nice young man, he's dead. He's dead, dead, dead." So there were these guys, and they were called the Clary Boys. I think that's what they were called, because back then, like, man gangs had the silliest, like, names. I'm just saying, y'all. I'm sorry if you're fans of, like, they were just, like, the Clary Boys, really. You're, like, grown men. Like, you're in your 30s. Grow the hell up, you know? And by that, in that time, by the time a man was in his 30s, he had, like, what, 7 kids? Grow up, Clary Boys. Anyway, these guys would come to town, they'd tear the place down, because this was the frontier back then. There was not a lot of law and order. So, a lot like Patrick Swayze on Roadhouse, another cute Pisces man. They said Abe, like, got the guy, Jack Armstrong, who was the leader, and he was like, "Look, dude, like, first of all, you're capping with that name, Jesus." But Abe was like, "I will fight you. And if I win, man to man, you have to leave town forever." And he won. And he got rid of the guy. And every time I hear that story, I'm like, Abe literally was just minding his own business. Like, he didn't have to do any of that. He just had to keep the bar safe and, like, keep the patrons happy. He didn't have to run the guy out of town and protect the schools and hospital. He didn't have to do any of that. But he just did it because he was such a kind guy. It's giving Will Graham vibes, not even gonna lie. So, this is moving into his 5th house. And the 5th house is the house of romance, courtship, the inner child, having kids of your own and really engaging them and, like, and having and raising them and, like, learning to play with them and being a good parent. That's what the 5th house is. And it's ruled by Leo. So, my favorite people, imaginary and real, what do they have? What specific placement? Can we say Bueller, Paddington, Peter Rabbit? Anyone have the answer? It is someone with Venus and Aries. And Abraham Lincoln has Venus and Aries at 7 degrees in the 5th house. Those people, that is the exact aspect my mom and Dana Scully has. And when those people when they see a little cutie pie in the corner, looking all emo and cute, you know what they do? They walk their little cute butt over there, and they tell them, "Hey, I know you, like, just met me, and you don't know me from Adam or Eve, but I'm going to be your future spouse. So just make your peace with it. Here I am. Here I am. Husband or wife, what do you need?" And that is just how they are. Like, my mom's courtship with my dad, that's it. She knew. Like, she saw him and she was like, "That's my husband. Yep, that's him. I got him." So, see also Dana Scully. Good Lord. What a Venus and Aries. Oh, Lord. What does my mom say about Dana Scully upon her first meeting with Fox Mulder? She'd already cut that pony from the herd. So, as we move into Abraham Lincoln's 6th house, he's going to go to a party and he's going to meet this really cute girl named Mary Todd. The Juliet to his Romeo. All right, let's get it, Pisces. We'll see y'all in part 4 of this weird Abraham Lincoln, Mary Todd Lincoln tribute video. All right, it's the time you have all been waiting for. It is time to talk about the fantastic girlfriends and lovers of Abraham Lincoln, our 16th president. So here's a fun fact about Abraham Lincoln. He is a stone cold player. So you know how I was talking about how even someone as charismatic and wholesome sounding as Abraham Lincoln had his faults. And His faults came in the form of romance. And that's what we're going to talk about right now. And I'm going to do my best to keep a straight face. So, as we are examining Abraham Lincoln's natal chart, we are in the 5th house, the house of romance, the house of professing your love, the house of Shakespearean love, courtly love. So I call it the courtship house. So in the 5th house, he has his Venus in Aries at 7 degrees. Poor man. Okay. So he would, of course, ultimately marry Todd Lincoln. But before he did, bro was bagging bitches like Andy Griffith. I'm not even joking, y'all. And like Andy Griffith, one girlfriend was more badass than the last. So his first time Cupid's arrow hit my man was when he met Anne Rutledge. And they were kind of childhood sweethearts. She came from New Salem, Illinois, which is where he was living at the time. And they just kind of had this really cute, like, Simba and Nala type romance where they were like besties and kind of kids together. And they just kind of grew up together. And he came back to town and he was like, you know, I'm in love with you. So, so what happened with Anne Rutledge is her father kind of shipped her with a guy named McNamara, and he left town, and everyone thought he died of fever, and he didn't. And so at that time, Abraham was kind of going behind his bud's back and smooching on his girl. And I'm like, Abraham, that's toxic behavior, but don't worry, his toxic behavior towards his girlfriends will only increase, unfortunately. So, I want to preface everything I'm going to say by saying I do not excuse Abraham Lincoln for any of this behavior he's about to engage in. Just kind of being a shitty human being, just saying, Abe. However, I do want to point out that along with his awesome stepmom, amazing older sister, his girlfriends whipped him into shape. And they did not hesitate to kind of kick the shit out of his ego when he was being a chauvinistic man. So, preface all of this, let's go. So anyway, this guy, McNamara, comes back to town, and he's like, what the hell, dude? And Rutledge is very embarrassed, and McNamara kind of gives her a scarlet letter. So, all the men in this situation are being shitty. And Rutledge dies, kind of in shame, even though she didn't do anything wrong. I mean, this was, what, 1830s courting. So what, they held hands in the buggy? Okay, not to drag the show, because I love it, The Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, but when they're talking about the, quote, swinging, it's never like, I mean, it's, you know, it is the boundaries couples set with each other. However, the way they talk it up, you'd think it was like, corn, you know, corn that they grow in Iowa. It would be that kind of thing, like the corn crops. But, it's not. It's just like, he held hands with her. It's so 8th grade playground, and nothing against Mormon Wives, but it's just like, yeah, it's kind of playground shit. Anyway, Rutledge was disgraced for this, and I'm like, what the hell? She didn't do anything. So, she certainly didn't cheat, because McNamara was a flake, okay? Everyone was kind of being shitty here, except for Anne, and I'm on her side. So, she died of typhoid fever in 1835, and Lincoln was just crushed by it. He had bouts of depression, and they were all linked to his ladies and his family. As you can see, my boy's got his South Node in the 6th house in Taurus. So, we see a man very desperately trying to hold on to the people he loves, and they're slipping through his fingers like sand. Ascendant Uranus, like, right on his ascendant at 12 degrees. So, like, yeah, bro's gonna have some sad times in his life and see a lot of people he loved dies. And, like, his big sis, who he looked up to, and then Anne, his first love, you know, bid it at this early age in very unfair ways. So later on, and Abe never stopped loving Anne. It says after he was elected president, even he was asked by a friend named Cottle, I think is his name, Isaac Cottle, about Anne. And Lincoln was married at that time. He had kids with Mary Todd, and he says, "It is true, true indeed, I did. I love the woman dearly and soundly. She was a handsome girl, would have made a good loving wife. I did honestly and truly love the girl and think often of her now." And I'm like, oh, buddy, yeah, like, he had that wound. Like, good God, poor guy. So, especially with his south node almost exactly on the descendant, opposing his ascendant with Uranus. Like, yeah, you're going to have some weird-ass shit taking people from your life with that aspect. But don't worry, it gets worse. So then Abe fell in love. I fell in love with a girl. Never know once, but most completely. So he's having his Jack White moment here. And he sees this girl. And her name is Mary Owens. So let's talk about Mary Owens. Mary Badass Owens. I'm sorry, that's her full name. So what happened was Abe, it was, okay, so in the day, instead of, you know, Instagram or Tinder profile, people would have these, quote, newspaper brides. And what you do is you put an ad in the paper and you'd be like, I need 24, 34, 46, what a wooden hand, you know, as a wife. Because women were viewed as property back then, and it was effing icky. Okay, but don't worry, a toxic ass man in this story is about to get the shit kicked out of his ego. So don't worry, we're getting there. So Mary Owens, and looking at her picture, a lovely woman. Okay, wow, nice looking lady. So just putting that out there. Okay, wow, what a babe. So Mary Smith Owens, she was also older than Abe, which I love. She was 1808. So she wrote a letter. She responded to Abraham Lincoln's ad in the paper, "Need wife, will respond." And she's like, "Hey, let's hook up, man." And she sent a portrait of herself. You know, photography was just beginning. So that, yeah. And another thing Abe did was bag rich chicks. Like, he has a tight boy. So all of them were redheads. Fox Mulder vibes, and or Scott Summer vibes, I guess. So Mary is, you know, the daughter of a planter, and Anne Rutledge is the daughter of the man who founded New Salem, Springfield. So kind of high, you know, good side of the tracks, quote, chicks. Abe was broke as hell. He was dirt poor at this time, but bro could get it, okay? He's an Aquarian. So he courts Mary Owens through letters, and then he meets her one day in New Salem. And when he sees her, he writes to his friend that the photo, that she did not match the photo in her Tinder profile, in her Instagram profile. So he wrote this scathing letter to his friend, and every word of it, I want to absolutely just, I mean, have a spell that gives this guy ingrown toenails, because he is terrible to her. This wonderful woman who wants to marry him. So the letter's terrible. I'm not going to read it all, but he says he calls her an old maid. He says she is a fair match for Falstaff. I'm like, Jesus, dude, you're mean. Um, he says she reminds him of his mother, not from withered features, for her skin was too full of fat to permit its contracting into wrinkles, but from her want of teeth, weather-beaten appearance in general, and from a kind of notion that ran in my head that nothing could have commenced at the size of infancy and reached her present bulk in less than 35 or 40 years. And in short, I was not at all pleased with her. And I'm like, okay, Chris Brown, calm your jets, you toxic man. So then he goes to marry, and yeah, at that time, she was probably a little older than most marrying age of young women at that time. And so he goes to her, treating her like a leftover woman. And guess what she does? She throws it back in his face and said, guess what, Buster? I don't even need you. And she left him holding the bag. And I love that for her. Mary Owens, feminist. Can we all just give a hand to my girl? So, Mary Owens married happy, and she had several sons, and they fought on the Confederate side, which is kind of funny. And when asked about Abraham Lincoln years later, after she had become a grandmother and all of this, a biographer tracked her down, and she said of Mr. Lincoln, she said, Mr. Lincoln was deficit in those little links which make up the great chain of a woman's happiness. And I miss I am like, sister Mary Owens, preach, girl, and I will turn those pages for you. So did Mary Owens, along with his awesome stepmother and older sister who raised him, did Mary Owens, was she the one that ultimately kind of changed his mind about women? And like, women are badass, and they're not all soft gentleness, and they'll kick the shit out of your pride if you cross them. And I love that for Mary Owens. So just went off on a little tangent about her. I love Mary Owens. She's a feminist hero. So here we go. We will see y'all in part 4 of this very weird, or part 5 of this very weird Abraham Lincoln tribute video. We'll see y'all.